Nikola Jokic is the frontrunner for the regular season Most Valuable Player award this year. Again, for the third straight season. While this shows how much Jokic is ahead of the competition, making the MVP award his monopoly, it also causes voters fatigue and starts to make some people jealous. Jealous that they couldn't achieve what a non-athletic, slow big man makes look easy. That feeling of jealousy has caused some of them to say some outrageous things about Nikola. Most notably ex-NBA player Kendrick Perkins, who's now an analyst for ESPN. Let's see what Perkins and some other NBA analysts and players have said about Jokic, and if it actually makes some sense to think such stuff. The short and right answer is no, but still let's counter-argue his argument in a more professional manner. Let's start by hearing what Kendrick Perkins actually had to say. Is it Uchi Wally or is it One Mic? That's what Jay-Z said. I just want to know what songs are we dancing to. So when I say this, I ask what is the criteria for the MVP and how the goalposters move. I'm asking these questions for a reason. This was Kendrick's introduction. When it comes down to guys winning MVP since 1990, it's only 3 guys that won the MVP that wasn't top 10 in scoring. Do you know who those 3 guys were? Steve Nash, Jokic, and Dirk Nowitzki. What do those guys have in common? I'll let it sit there and marinate. You think about it. They're all white. He didn't want to come out and say it, but we all understood what he tried to say. Let's break this nasty narrative before we move on to the next ones. Perk points out Steve Nash, who was 40th and 29th, Dirk Nowitzki, who was 11th, and Jokic, who was 12th and 6th. It seems Perkins forgot that he was one to argue that Chris Paul should have won the 2021 MVP award, despite CP3 being 50th in scoring that season. Yeah, 50th. One more thing is that Perkins intentionally started at 1990 because if he had started earlier, he would have had to include Magic Johnson in the list. Let it sit there and marinate. You think about why he didn't include Magic in this nasty argument. He later doubled down on the take, uploading a video to Twitter, which he later deleted. The Uchi Wally and One Mic question is in regards of the inconsistent criteria that the NBA voters supposedly have when choosing who the most valuable player is for the season. While Uchi Wally has some misogynistic lyrics, One Mic is more socially aware. So while some voters value winning more than stats, others seem to value things the other way around. This has always been the case, not just when it comes to white players, but as Perk likes to say, carry on. Perkins is not a fan of advanced stats, rather considers himself an eye test kind of guy. JJ Redick, who's a part of the First Take crew, was more than motivated to argue against Perkins' stupid comments, destroying him with both numbers and eye test arguments. JJ said it best, "I know you don't like advanced stats, but I must use a few here. I just want to react because I didn't hear this, the idea that his teammates shoot good or bad shots, so we can actually track which players create good shoot opportunities for their teammates. And Nikola Jokic is in top 5 in shot quality created. And if you watch him play, which I know you do, when Jokic is deciding whether or not to shoot and score, he's making a read, because that's what good basketball players do. So if he's getting a double, he's going to kick. If he sees the help coming too early, he's going to swing it to the corner for an open 3. It's a good pass. It's the most efficient 3-point shot in basketball." Perkins aggressively replied that he doesn't know the criteria for the MVP award anymore, and doesn't know how people judge players, whether it's based on their team record, their advanced stats, the eye test, or anything else for that matter. Another NBA analyst who's suspicious of Nikola Jokic's MVP award is LeBron James fanboy Nick Wright. Nick Wright has some of the most outrageous takes in NBA media, and this one is no exception. The MVP has to be awarded in some hallway somewhere because he's not playing that great in round 2. When you look at the list of MVPs in league history, I say this with much respect to Nikola, he would be the worst player to win one in the last 35 years. Chris Paul wouldn't be one of the worst because he's an all-time great player. And Nikola Jokic is only a good player who's having a good season. Nick Wright doesn't consider himself a Nikola Jokic hater because, when I said this 2 years ago, I was called a Nikola Jokic hater, but I ended up being right. I said that I had Nikola Jokic second in the MVP race behind Chris Paul. I was called a hater, but Chris Paul swept his ass in the playoffs. The second one doesn't even make sense. People have got to realize that the NBA Most Valuable Player award is a regular season award only. It's based on what you show in the 82 games before the postseason, not during the playoffs. However, despite getting swept, Nikola Jokic still played great basketball in the series against the Suns, averaging 25 points, 13.3 rebounds, and 5.8 assists, leading his Nuggets in these 3 statistical categories. Chris Paul's team beating Nikola Jokic's Nuggets doesn't give CP3 any points in the MVP race. So when someone like Nick Wright mentions playoff success and regular season MVP in the same sentence, just stop paying attention to them. It's much easier that way. But beware, they'll continue arguing. Last year I was called a hater because I said there's two guys in the Western Conference carrying mediocre teams, Jokic and Luka. And everybody was like, oh Nick, you're showing nepotism, you're biased. I was like, no, Luka is better. And Luka made it to the Western Conference Finals. Listen, Jokic, if he hadn't won those 2 MVPs, he would be the leading candidate. Again, let's say together, playoff success doesn't matter in regards of winning regular season MVP. There is such thing called voters' fatigue, and this is a perfect example for it. The regular season MVP shouldn't be given to somebody who has not won it yet. Instead, it should go to the most valuable player in that season, no matter if they're winning it for the first time or three-peating. ESPN's Max Kellerman recently stated, "I've never seen a disconnect like this guy where a guy monopolizes the MVP, and yet he floats out of my top 5 at number 5. His fellow ESPN coworker Kendrick Perkins stated afterwards that Jokic needs to show playoff success to win future MVPs. It's crazy to say that Jokic is not a top 5 player in the league when he's leading his squad to the top seed in the conference while averaging a triple-double. But more importantly, we must not forget that the NBA regular season MVP award is a regular season award only. Come on, the name itself says it. But okay, we're going to bust this myth also. The Nuggets lost to eventual champions Golden State Warriors in the playoffs in 2021-22. In this gentleman's sweep, the Nuggets had Jokic surrounded with not such productive players. Monte Morris, who's now averaging 10 points per game for the lowly Washington Wizards, Will Barton, who recently got cut from those same Wizards, Austin Rivers, who's averaging 5 points this season, JaMychal Green, who's averaging 6 points per game, Bones Highland, who's shooting 39% from the field, Bryn Forbes and DeMarcus Cousins, who are both out of the league as we speak. Aaron Gordon and Jeff Green are the only guys who are still playing for the Nuggets this season. A year prior, the Nuggets got swept by the Suns, who were also a finals team in the same postseason. This sweep hurts, but let's not forget that Jamal Murray was out of the series with a torn ACL. Draymond Green is one of the most outspoken guys in the NBA. A student of the game, you can always find Draymond watching tapes from other players around the league and spotting something that a lot of people haven't noticed. While watching a Nuggets game, Draymond noticed that Jokic missed some defensive rotations in his first half. I had 4 clips at halftime, and it was a Nuggets game, and I went at Jokic's defense. I'm like, if they're ever going to be a good team, he's the backline of the defense. He has to be good defensively. And I showed 4 clips of him not rotating over to the low man, him not moving 4 clips. And I was very critical of him. Draymond then added that Jokic later started doing those same rotations. He came up to me that following year and said something along the lines of, "I saw what you said about my defense, you were right," or "I appreciate it." And he said, "I've gotten better." I said, "You've 100% gotten better. I've been watching you this year and you've 100% gotten better." And that was a big moment for me because this TV thing is new, Draymond said. After his playing career is over, Draymond will make one hell of an NBA analyst, that's for sure. This is an example of how constructive criticism can do wonders in a player's performance. But there have been a couple of situations where trash-talking Nikola Jokic has proven his fuel for him as well. Russell Westbrook, Markieff Morris, and Dwight Howard have all tried to get into the Joker's head, but ultimately failed. Trash-talking Nikola Jokic brings the same outcome as saying that the Joker's MVPs are won because of racist reasons. It makes you look dumb. Each of these 3 guys that have tried their luck against Jokic have gotten the best of him. Nikola Jokic is a pretty chill guy, unless you start provoking him. I guess the message has been spread. So that's why most players don't even try him anymore. It's just the analyst now. After a 17-year NBA career, Richard Jefferson decided to take his talents to the media world. Now an ESPN basketball analyst, we get to hear RJ's takes on basketball on a daily basis. He's a big-time fan of Jokic, but sometimes has shown uncertainties about the Joker's MVP case. I have Jokic and Giannis neck and neck. That means Giannis is going to have a week, which we know he can. He can do that. And all of a sudden, he jumps a little bit. Jokic can have 2 okay games. It's not like Denver's undefeated. So my point is, I'm not trying to devalue anything that Jokic is doing by saying we need to take a harder look at what Giannis is doing with all of his teammates injured. The main reason why Jokic has won 2 straight MVPs, he's a phenomenal player, I'm not arguing that. But the main reason he won was because he led the Nuggets without Jamal Murray to a high seed in the West. And this year, Giannis is doing exactly that. No Chris Middleton for 6 months, and the Bucks are still the first seed in the East. Unfortunately for RJ's take, when we look at the Western Conference standings, the Nuggets are running away with the first seed as well, as the Grizzlies are 4.5 games behind them in second. The Nuggets have the luxury of more depth this season, with Jamal Murray back and Aaron Gordon, who's performing like a fringe all-star. However, especially in Gordon's case, you could argue that Nikola has a big part in that. Without Jokic's gravity and court vision, Aaron Gordon's performance would definitely suffer. While what Giannis is doing is nothing short of amazing, let's not take anything away from Jokic and the Nuggets. When the Nuggets' rotation was cut short due to injuries, the counter for Jokic's MVP case was that they only had 49 wins. This season, when the Nuggets are healthy and the first seed in the West, the counter is that Jokic has more help than Giannis. Nikola Jokic has been a back-to-back regular season MVP award winner, and it seems that the voters are getting fatigued with it. While he's on track to a three-peat, NBA analysts such as Kendrick Perkins have gone out of their way to say that he doesn't deserve it. Regardless of what comments have been made and what the voters choose, please let's appreciate all these MVP candidates while they're here giving their best. Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic are all having tremendous seasons that would win in numerous other years, but there can only be one. Players like Luka Doncic and Devin Booker are also fast on their heels. Whoever runs away with the MVP award, you better know they're worthy of it.